Karen hit my son with a clipboard. My wife is the county sheriff. It only took 9 seconds for Karen to destroy a month's worth of my son's confidence and a year's worth of science fair work. 9 seconds. That's how long the clip was, filmed by a neighbor's ring cam. In it, my son Noah, 11 years old, is standing quietly on the sidewalk, clutching a tri-fold science board about plant respiration. Karen, in her self-assigned HOA patrol vest, storms toward him screaming. You can't hear all the words, but one cuts through crystal clear. We don't allow loiterers here. Then she slams her clipboard across his cheek. Noah drops the board. It hits the sidewalk, crumples. So does he. The camera catches his mouth forming a single word as he stumbles. Mom, my name is Marcus Leland. I teach 7th grade biology at Green Valley Middle School. I've broken up hallway fights, carried sobbing students through lockdown drills, and had my car keyed by kids who didn't like their quiz scores. I thought I'd seen everything. I was wrong. My wife, Sheriff Candace Leland, first female sheriff in Brooks County, decorated Marine, calm, fair, unshakably moral. Karen had no idea who she was messing with. We'd only been in Meadowglen for 5 weeks. We moved here for the school as well. I did. Candace had a broader plan to dismantle the growing distrust between law enforcement and civilians in this county, one beat at a time. Ironically, Meadowglen seemed perfect. Quiet streets, neighbors who waved, a community Facebook group full of cookie recipes and lost cats. But then Karen knocked on our door on day 3. She had a clipboard, of course, aviators, and a laminated badge that read Meadowglen HOA Enforcement Team. We need to discuss your son's sidewalk use, she said flatly. I blinked. Excuse me, rollerblades, scooters, bikes without reflectors. I run a tight perimeter. I glanced down at her badge. It said self-authorized. I politely said I'd look into it. I didn't. And that's when the warnings started showing up. Notes about unapproved flower beds, unauthorized wind chimes, and my personal favorite excessive mail delivery. We laughed about it, Candace said. Ignore her. Fake HOA syndrome. But Karen didn't like being ignored, especially by a black family she couldn't intimidate. The day of the science fair was bright and clear. Noah wanted to walk his board 2 blocks to school, beaming with pride. I watched him go from the window, coffee in hand. 8 minutes later, my phone rang. Neighbor? Panicked. Karen hit Noah with a clipboard. He's okay, but you need to come now. I ran. By the time I arrived, Noah was sitting on the curb, red cheek, torn poster board in his lap. Karen stood over him, huffing like she'd just slain a wild animal. He didn't have permission to stand here, she barked. We have rules. I don't remember yelling. I don't remember how I got so close. But I do remember whispering, that's my son. Karen blinked. So what you should teach him better. A siren sounded behind us. Sheriff Leland's SUV rolled to a stop, and everything changed. Candace didn't storm out of the sheriff's SUV. She stepped, calm, precise. The way you move when your badge speaks louder than your voice. Karen had no idea who she was. Not yet. Noah saw his mom and burst into sobs. Candace was by his side in seconds, kneeling beside him, touching his swollen cheek gently. Her eyes flicked to me, then to Karen. Is this the woman who hit you? Noah nodded, wiping his face. Karen scoffed. I tapped him. He was loitering, and I, Candace, rose slowly. You hit a child with a clipboard while impersonating an authority figure on public property, Karen laughed. Oh, honey, I am the authority here. Meadowglen HOA. I run compliance enforcement. Candace reached into her jacket and held up her badge. Sheriff Candace Leland. And unless you have a municipal contract or a legally recognized neighborhood charter, which Meadowglen doesn't, you're impersonating a public official? Karen paled. Ma'am, you are not the authority. I am. I'd never seen Karen speechless before. She stood there, half laughing, half fuming. This is outrageous. I'll be contacting your superior. Candace didn't blink. You're welcome to, but first, we're filing a formal assault report, and you'll hand over that clipboard. Now, Karen clutched it tighter. This is private HOA property. No, not, ma'am, Candace said, her voice razor sharp. You're standing on a county sidewalk with a weapon you used to strike a minor. Give me the clipboard. A beat passed, then two. Then Karen tossed it to the grass and marched back toward her house. Later that evening, Candace filed charges: simple assault, impersonation of authority, endangerment of a minor. We didn't press charges lightly. We'd both worked in public institutions long enough to know what accusations could do. But this wasn't about vengeance. It was about protection and exposure. Because that clipboard, it wasn't just a clipboard. It had a list of violators, over 40 names, mostly Black, Latino, or immigrant families. Notes like drives too fast, warn, too many children, eyesore, stairs too long, suspicious, unmarked packages, drugs. Beside each name was a column labeled compliant with checks and X's. She wasn't just pretending to enforce, she was profiling. I brought the clipboard to the DA's office. They were stunned, especially when Candace discovered that Karen had also issued official fines PayPal receipts for HOA citation settlement from at least 7 families. Over $3,000 collected total. The HOA didn't exist. We confirmed it with the county clerk. Meadow Glen's HOA was dissolved in 2016 after mismanagement and illegal fee collection. There was no legal entity left. Karen was a one-woman show with a laminator and a god complex. That week, I posted about the incident on the community page. Not with rage, just facts. Noah's picture, his bruised cheek, the charges, the fake HOA, the clipboard. I ended it with this: if you've ever been fined, threatened, or shamed by this woman in the name of compliance, please speak up. You're not alone. Within 24 hours, the post had over 600 comments. A veteran neighbor said Karen threatened to have his service dog removed for being too aggressive looking. A single mother said Karen screamed at her kids for drawing chalk art, calling it vandalism. A teenage boy said Karen once stood at his bus stop with a stopwatch, saying he loitered too long. Dozens of residents came forward. A few even admitted they paid her out of fear. She had the clipboards, the jackets. She talked like she was official. One woman said, "We didn't know. Now they did." Candace and I hosted a neighborhood meeting at the community center. It was packed. We printed every violation Karen had written, covered the wall with them. People gasped reading the language so specific, so cruel. We invited a local civil rights attorney and a rep from the actual county housing office. They explained people's rights, explained how fake HOAs operate and what's never legal. No private citizen can fine you on public land. No HOA can function without legal registration and open books. And no one can strike a child and call it enforcement. Karen didn't attend the meeting, but she watched from her window. The next morning, she posted her own statement online, a rambling rant about false charges, radical sheriffs, and leftist infiltration of peaceful suburbs. But no one bought it anymore. The facade had cracked, and we were just getting started. When the storm dies down, most people assume the damage is over. They don't realize the flood came from beneath the surface. That's what Candace and I realized about Karen's clipboard operation. It wasn't just about noise complaints or unapproved wind chimes. It was a cover, a front, for something far deeper. The real break came from Mrs. Castillo, a retired librarian 2 blocks over. She knocked on our door with a trembling hand and a folder full of printed emails. She made me part of it, she said softly, without ever telling me what she was really doing. Inside the folder was a series of communications from Karen's Neighborhood Excellence Task Force, a group she advertised as a volunteer community beautification effort. She asked for help delivering notices, collecting donation pledges, and surveying properties. Except the survey forms were labeled pre-fine notices, with pre-selected checkboxes like yard clutter observed, children outside unsupervised, flag or signage not approved by board. There was no board, And the donations over $18,000 collected via Venmo, Cash App, and checks written out directly to K. Voss. I knew enough from teaching civic government collecting funds under a fictitious authority for supposed public services, common fraud, especially if it targeted protected classes. Candace took the evidence to the county investigator, and that's when things escalated from misdemeanor assault to federal inquiry. Turns out, Karen had applied for a neighborhood preservation grant from the state's Urban Wellness Fund, a $50,000 grant for innovative citizen-led community improvement efforts. On her application, she claimed Meadowglen HOA was fully functional and incorporated. Her patrols were part of a resident-backed crime deterrent program. Her Clipboard system was an alternative dispute resolution tool. And most shockingly, she listed Sheriff Candace Leland as a project endorser. She had forged my wife's digital signature. That changed everything. Within 72 hours, the state attorney general's office opened a file. Fraud, forgery, misuse of state funds, identity falsification, civil rights violations. But perhaps the most sickening part, Karen didn't just make the whole HOA up to feed her ego. She used it to push out families she didn't like. The realtor connection came from a young couple, Ashwin and Lila, who had moved in just months before us. I told Karen we were first-time homeowners. Ashwin said, she smiled and handed us a binder full of mandatory regulations. She said the house would be flagged if we didn't comply. Turns out, Karen had a deal with a local real estate agent named Blaine Cosgrove. Every time she pushed a family into selling either through harassment or fake violations, he got the listing. And Karen, she got a referral fee, quietly paid under the table. That's why she kept saying this neighborhood has standards. Standards she enforced through fear and profited from. We compiled everything testimonies. Screenshots, Venmo receipts, the grant application, the forged endorsement, and the full violator list from her Clipboard. Raphael, the county prosecutor, reviewed it personally. You realize, he told Candace, this is the biggest neighborhood fraud case we've had in years. She nodded, and she hit my son to cover it. Meanwhile, the community rallied harder than ever. Jessica Tran, whose daughter uses a mobility walker, started a local site, stopthefakehoa.org. It gave residents a place to submit Karen-related documents anonymously. People poured in. She made me rip out my vegetable garden. She said my son's speech device was a noise violation. She charged me $50 for a light bulb infraction. She called my autistic son uncooperative and told me to keep him indoors. It wasn't just controlling behavior. It was targeted abuse. And now, everyone saw it. The local paper picked it up, fake HOA. Real harm, Meadowglen woman faces civil and criminal probe. Karen responded with another video. This time, she was crying. I was just trying to create order, she said. These outsiders don't understand how communities used to work. She blamed wokeness, radical policing, and even implied Noah faked his injury. That's when Candace lost her patience. She called a press conference not as a mother, as the county sheriff. We are investigating this case with full authority. This is no longer about neighborhood disputes. This is about lies, fraud, assault, and hate dressed up as civic duty. Then she held up the clipboard. This isn't compliance. This is coercion. The next day, Karen was served official charges, 2 counts of felony fraud, 1 count of identity forgery, 1 count of assault on a minor, multiple civil rights violations, and conspiracy to interfere with housing access. Her assets were frozen, her PayPal accounts locked. Blaine Cosgrove's real estate license was suspended, their scheme fully exposed. But even with all that, what meant the most was Noah. He came home from school, still quiet, but asked, are people going to be safe now? Candace kneeled beside him, tucked his hair behind his ear, and said, they are. Because you told the truth. You don't hear the moment a lie breaks. It doesn't shatter like glass. It buckles under the weight of truth. And that's exactly what happened to Karen Voss. Her kingdom, the fake HOA she'd ruled with fear, clipboards, and fake citations was crumbling in real time. The day after the formal charges were filed, Karen's house was swarmed, not by police, but by neighbors. But this wasn't a mob. This was a reckoning. People gathered not to scream, but to reclaim. To finally look the woman who'd policed their flower beds and surveilled their children square in the face and say, "We're not afraid of you anymore." Karen peeked through the blinds but didn't come out. Candace stood with me at the end of the driveway, silent, steady. The weight of the badge balanced by something deeper: justice earned. The sheriff's office released an official statement that night. They confirmed that Karen Voss had committed multiple crimes: fraudulent representation of a government entity, criminal impersonation, unauthorized collection of funds, assault of a minor, targeted harassment of protected groups, and forgery of a sheriff's signature on a state grant. The total list of victims had grown to 57 households. Most had lived in fear. Some had moved away. Many had paid fines they thought were real. A few admitted they had gone into debt out of fear of non-compliance. But now they had receipts, and they had a case. Karen was taken into custody at 9:37 a.m. on a Thursday. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She stepped outside in that ridiculous vest, clipboard still in hand, as if somehow she could argue her way out of it. Candace wasn't the arresting officer that would have been a conflict of interest, but she was there, and she said nothing. She didn't need to. The press did the talking. Fake HOA president arrested after striking. Child of county sheriff from clipboard to courtroom. The fall of Karen Voss community rises against suburban tyrant. The courtroom was packed. Victims were given the chance to testify. I sat with Noah, hand in his, as neighbors stood one by one. Mrs. Castillo, the librarian Karen had manipulated, spoke first. She told me I could help keep the neighborhood clean, but what she meant was, keep it white. Ashwin spoke next. She fined us for unauthorized cooking smells. It wasn't about rules. It was about who we were. Then Candace took the stand. My son was assaulted, she said. But this case isn't just about one incident. It's about a system one woman built to enforce fear through fiction and profit. Noah watched his mother as if seeing her for the first time. Karen's defense. She was just trying to help. She claimed the HOA had existed in spirit, that she sensed a need for order, that her fines were suggestions, that her notes were community guidelines, that her referral fees from the realtor were thank you gifts. She even said Noah had been defiant and that discipline was required. The judge shut that down fast. You impersonated a legal entity. You forged signatures. You weaponized appearance and disability as tools of removal. That's not community service. That's a scam. Verdict: guilty on all primary counts. She was sentenced to 2 years of house arrest with tracking, restitution payments to every documented victim, a permanent ban from any HOA or civic leadership activity, public apology read aloud in the next town meeting, and 1,000 hours of community service specifically with victims of housing discrimination. She would never rule with a clipboard again. But even after the trial, the damage lingered. There were cracks in our neighborhood that no court order could fill, so we filled them ourselves. We dismantled everything Karen built. The fake signs were taken down. The compliance flyers were burned in a backyard fire pit gathering. The HOA mailbox Karen used emptied and repainted with a sign that said, "Real community, no control." We established the Meadowglen Unity Council, not a governing body, but a listening circle. Every month, residents meet to air concerns, share ideas, and talk openly, especially about the ugly truths. We invited civil rights educators to teach us what we should have known from the start. No one gets to wield fear where the law does not grant them power. And Noah, he's different now, quieter in some ways, but bolder in others. He joined student government, his platform. Nobody gets to tell you you don't belong. He turned the remnants of his ruined science board into a new project, one he entered in a regional contest called Justice Through Design. The title, "This is what fake power looks like." He won second place, but the room gave him a standing ovation. A month later, we hosted a block party. No clipboards, no badges, No rules beyond decency. Kids drew chalk murals on the sidewalks Karen once patrolled. Elders danced to salsa in lawn chairs. I manned the grill. While Candace handed out flyers on how to spot a fake HOA, Noah stood near the center of it all, laughing with kids who once avoided the curb. And I thought, this is how communities are supposed to look. Not policed, not panicked, just present. If Karen's reign taught us anything, it's that fear wears many faces. Sometimes it's a uniform, sometimes a clipboard, and sometimes it's just the silence we allow too long. But here's what we learned. Community doesn't need control. It needs connection. Weeks after the trial, the neighborhood still buzzed with change. A group of teens painted a mural on the west side fence, the one Karen used to tear flyers off. It showed kids of every background holding hands, with bold letters underneath, "You belong here." The artist Olivia Kim, age 15, the same girl Karen once tried to write up for chalk art on the sidewalk, now she was painting something permanent. We established new norms, but not the kind Karen had pushed. No more made-up violations, no clipboards, no scare tactics. Instead, we created what Candace called a civic resource circle, an informal team of residents who answered questions, connected people to services, and most importantly, listened. We posted a flyer on every door, no fake authority here, no illegal fines, no fear, just neighbors, side by side, and a number to call if anyone pretended otherwise. Karen's court-mandated apology came during the next community meeting. She stood small now, deflated and read from a paper. "I acted without authority. I caused harm. I made families feel unwelcome in a place that should have felt safe. I'm sorry." Some people scoffed. Some rolled their eyes. But most stayed silent, not because they forgave her, but because they had already moved on. Her power was gone, her clipboard gone, her name a cautionary tale. But we didn't stop at justice. We went after the root. Candace partnered with the State Attorney General's office to start an initiative project, Curbside Truth, educating neighborhoods on how to detect and dismantle fake HOAs and illegal enforcement schemes. We held forums at libraries, spoke on local news. We even co-wrote a piece in the Chronicle titled, "When Authority is Faked, Trust is Broken and How to Rebuild Both." Noah helped design the campaign's logo, a cracked clipboard, split in half, with roots growing out of it. He called it the end of pretending. One night, after dinner, I found Noah on the porch sketching. I sat beside him, watching his pencil move. He looked up and asked, "Dad, do you think she ever really believed she was helping?" It stopped me cold, because I didn't know. Maybe she did. Maybe she thought her fear was protection, that her power was earned. Maybe she didn't see people just property lines. But what I told my son was this: it doesn't matter what she believed. What matters is what she did, and what we did when we saw it. This story began with a slap from a clipboard. It ended with a neighborhood awakening, not just to Karen's abuse of power, but to our own silence, our own complicity, the way we sometimes choose comfort over confrontation, rules over reason, and fake order over real community. But Meadowglen changed because we changed it. If someone in your community is acting like the law but isn't the law, speak up. Ask for credentials. Ask where the money goes. Don't be afraid to say that's not right. If you've ever paid a fake fine, reported someone for being too different, or stayed silent when your neighbor was harassed, don't carry guilt. Use your voice now. Share your story. Speak your truth, because community doesn't come from clipboards. It comes from courage. Let's make sure no one else ever gets told you don't belong here. And let's answer with one voice. Yes, they do.